it's like crap. Now I have to stop for 2 hours. Now I'm hungry. Now it's 4 o'clock.
Right.
And like, all right, well, day's almost over, right? So,
Well, I'm glad you could do this at least. This is very nice. And I brought, I don't know if
happy
you
to,
have one, but I've never done this
I
before,
do.
but I have a glass of whiskey here.
To the everlasting
Cheers.
glory of the infantry. It took God 6 days to create the world, and the seventh created American infantry, and said, "Boys, take care of it. It's yours till I get back." Cool.
Amazing. Keep Bisculos. All right, I am here talking to Ryan McBeth, Intel analyst, software architect, former infantry guy for 20 years plus, maybe something like that, and a YouTube content creator, now with 1 million subscribers. Congratulations, Ryan.
Thank you very much. And I work for Aeromed Lab.
That's true. American Drone Company.
The American Drone Company. I'm leaving here in, God, I guess about 4 hours. I got to catch a flight down to Dallas, Texas. We just bought a new test facility. We're hiring people. It's, I quit my job to do YouTube full time, and now I have like 5 jobs. Between being a novelist, I just finished The Wind Machine.
Oh, yeah?
Which you can get on Amazon. Yeah, I just finished a novel. Yeah, it was about a hedge fund manager who has a AI supercomputer that figures out there's going to be a limited exchange with the US and China. So if you were a hedge fund manager and you got this information, what would you do with it? Would you trade on that information? It's just a limited exchange. Would you trade on it, or would you try to tell the government, like, hey, this thing could happen? And even if you do tell the government, how do you do that?
What a cliffhanger.
You can't just call the government and say,
what a cliffhanger. I wonder what the guy did, but I guess I have to read the book to find out.
You have to read the book. The Wind Machine is available on Amazon, Kindle, and paperback. And I'm going to have an audiobook version for Marines available, I think, on the 5th.
That's amazing.
So, people who like to listen to audiobooks will be able to get it there.
Well, there's for sure no other Ryan McBeth in the world. You're the only one. And just to any Ryan McBeth fans that might be listening to us for the first time, we're Futucast. We're a Finnish language podcast. Nice to meet all of you. If you go to our channel, you'll find a lot of Finnish language podcasts. Those are probably not for you, but we have a few in English. Maybe the most famous, prominent ones are with Mark Galeotti, a historian. We talked about Russia, Putin, global politics, and then a former 3-star general from the U.S. Army. Ben Hodges was also a guest. That was an amazing episode. And now we have Ryan McBeth as a guest here. What an honor. What an experience this is. Cheers. I'm also, just to let every listener know, I'm drinking whiskey for the first time in our podcast, and I don't want this to become a habit.
First time ever? Or the first time like on the podcast?
First time on air.
Okay. You should do it more often. It loosens you up a little bit. Look, man, you're stuck in Finland. It's dark all the time. You might as well get some sunshine in your life through a bottle, if anything, right?
True. I'm gonna try to make it not a habit, because I'm liking this a bit too much, I must admit. I have a question about the Army. So it's true that you served in the infantry in the U.S. Army for 20 years.
I did. Got all Army National Guard. I did I was an anti-tank guy to start, and then they kind of said, poof, everyone who's anti-tank is now straight leg infantry. Well, in the Army, you have these things called MOSs. MOS means military occupational specialty. It's your job. And so it used to be anti-tank was a separate job than 11 Bravo, which is just straight infantry. And then I think in the mid 90s, they said, poof, okay, you're all 11 Bravo. Well, it's funny is that if you were an anti-tank guy, what happened was they said, like, all right, well, you're carrying the anti-tank weapon because you know anti-tank stuff, right? So I had to carry this heavy, typically anti-tank was the tow missile, you're in a vehicle, And then when you poof, all right, everyone's 11 Bravo infantry. Now you're the one who gets the Dragon or the Javelin, the man-portable anti-tank missile. So you're carrying this heavy thing around up and down hills in Germany. Like, man, my life was sucking for the longest time. But I really liked it, and I got good at it.
Yep.
I was good with the missile. I knew my system, and actually, I credit a lot of that in my seriousness toward why I was successful on YouTube initially, because I used to write software code, and I had a channel about software code, a little bit about cybersecurity. And then when Russia invaded Ukraine, I just knew all this anti-tank stuff, and so I made a couple of videos about cybersecurity in Ukraine, but also a couple of videos about why Russian tank turrets pop off their hulls, why Russia's doing this, how to kill a tank, stuff like that. And my channel just took off. I went from 5,000 subscribers to 50,000 subscribers in weeks. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what people want. And I've been doing that ever since.
You must not have hated the army. You spent 20 years there. And actually, I have a question about that. I also, I spent 1 year in the Finnish Defense Forces as a conscript, because you have to do military service here in Finland. I've never seen combat, obviously. And this is also kind of why I'm thinking about this question. I've been thinking about this for, I mean, every now and again, this comes to mind. And it's, what is it about the army where you train, and sometimes for foremen, maybe the most hellish work environment a human being can imagine, war, doing maybe the most hellish job a human being can do, war, that makes, what is it about that that makes some people love it or like it? Maybe like you, maybe even someone like you who's made personal sacrifices to be able to maintain a 20-year career in the army.
I can tell you, I've never been in combat, not like Ukraine. I've been in, I'm walking on our forward operating base, and mortar hits. It's like 100 meters away.
Well, that's still that's most than most people. That's more than most people, I'd say.
Or I've been like, hey, Ryan, we need you to drive down this road and see who tries to blow you up. Right. But I've never been under persistent enemy fire for days at a time, weeks at a time, months at a time, like in Ukraine. I haven't been in combat. I have not been in combat, not compared to what the Ukrainians are going through. That being said, I think for me, a lot of it was, I want to say adrenaline, but also like a sense of winning. And this is very hard to explain. Maybe because I never lost a person. For me, traveling down like Route Irish, that was one of the things that we did. We would go up and down this road called Route Irish. It was Baghdad Airport Road. Went from the airport all the way to the Green Zone, CCIR, Criminal Courthouse of Iraq. And, you would go down this road and the bad guys would try to kill you. And if they didn't kill you that day, it was a good feeling. Like, you didn't get me today. I was better than you. Better luck tomorrow. And maybe I'm a psychopath, but that feeling, I think it was Winston Churchill who once said, nothing is better than being shot at and missed. The feeling of being shot at and missed. But the feeling of me being better than the bad guys, of winning, of getting my men from point A to point B without any of them getting hurt, there was nothing like that in the world. I mean, maybe if you're a footballer, like winning a football championship or something, I don't know. But that feeling of winning, that I think that kind of, and you're always chasing that. You're always chasing that feeling, especially like when you even just in training, like when you have 4 gun trucks. Eventually, I wound up in a heavy weapons company, and when you have 4 gun trucks lined up, and they're all doing support by fire, you got machine guns going, you got grenade launchers going. You're coordinating with the infantry who are flanking while you're providing cover. Providing support by fire. It's just this amazing feeling. You are this finely honed instrument of death. And it's, as heavy weapons, you got 4 gun trucks with 50 caliber machine guns, Mark 19 automatic grenade launchers, MT-40 Bravo machine guns, and TOW anti-tank missiles. There isn't much we can't handle. We can fight tanks to a limited extent. And just that feeling, actually, there are things we can't handle, drones, but that wasn't the case back when back when I was in. The idea of these small loitering munitions, that wasn't a thing. But that feeling of just being able to be this righteous fist of America, it's just this amazing feeling. And I guess that's why I kind of stayed. I loved it. I loved it.
Do you think America needs or could have use of a conscription system like many other countries in the world? What do you think?
I don't think so. And I say that because the U.S., I've dealt with, let me back up for a second. I think everybody in the American military at some point thought that joining was a good idea. And even then, some of those people could be dirtbags, like you're trying to get them to do their job and all that. So it's almost like I feel like conscription, like we're just too independent minded to have conscription. And I feel like it would really reduce the capability of the force. There is a recruiting and retention problem right now in the U.S. military, but a lot of that is due to the fact that, soldiers can't look. There's a lot of young kids who like to smoke marijuana. I don't do it. I don't I don't understand why people do it. But I like these. I like cigars.
Sure.
But we should legalize marijuana and let smokers, let soldiers smoke marijuana if they, all right, so you can't smoke 8 hours before duty or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people good with computers smoke weed.
They like to smoke weed. If you want to smoke weed, I don't have a problem with that. Just don't do it within X amount of hours for duty. Don't show up to work high. No different than alcohol. And I think we should allow soldiers to grow beards. If we could, there's about 1/3 of the African Americans in the U.S. Army. They get razor bumps when they try to shave, and yet we make them shave, or we make them go get what's called a shaving profile, like a medical permission slip not to shave. All right. So why are we making it hard for people to serve? So let them have beards, let them smoke marijuana. All right. So the beard thing, maybe it has to be a quarter, no bigger than a 1/4 inch or something like that. Or we'll figure that part out. But plenty of armies in the world seem to function with beards. So I feel like conscription, I don't really see that helping the military, but I could easily see making quality of life changes like beards and being able to smoke marijuana and also better food. Like some of the chow halls are pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
Just to increase the funding that we increase portion size, increase healthier options. That could help recruiting and retention as well. So there's too many things that you can do without having conscription to solve your force needs than there would be to solve with conscription and get a bunch of people who don't want to serve in uniform and just make it harder for the NCOs. A country like your country, which is fairly small, makes a lot of sense because everyone is a rifleman. And if the Russian horde comes across those fences, like that one sniper said, Finland is so small and Russia is so big. Where are we going to bury all the bodies? Right. So it makes sense for that, for a country like Finland, but for the U.S. And actually, I don't even know how we would do it. I mean, you have about 2 million people graduating from high school every year. What is the population of Finland? Around 6 million?
5.5.
Yeah. So when you look at our military, we have 2 million high school kids graduating every year. Like, what are you going to do with that?
Right.
They're all going to, and a lot of conscript militaries, especially larger ones like Egypt, Iran, where everyone has to serve. These dudes, they serve for 2 years and they're kicking rocks for 2 years and they hate it. They got nothing to do. And when you have a 2 million man army, like, my God, the training is going to suffer. I don't know. There's just so many better options in conscription, I think.
Interesting. There are a few military-related topics of discussion here in Finland that I would like to get your insight on. There's always something military-related going on in Finland in the public discussion. One thing is related to APLs, anti-personnel landmines, and the Ottawa Agreement. So we joined, or we ratified, we are a part of the Ottawa Agreement since 2012, as are most European countries. I think every single country in the EU is part of the Ottawa Agreement, banning anti-personnel landmines, which is basically a mine, this is for listeners, not you, a mine that activates when a person steps on it, not a
victim detonated landmine.
Yeah,
specifically, yes.
And they were banned, obviously, because they planting them underground, and then a war ends. They can have very, very brutal consequences. If a kid goes out to play in the forests here, steps on a mine, they might die. Those mines don't recognize who's a combatant, who's a civilian. They kill anyone when someone steps on them. But now, since 2022, things have changed in Europe. Things have changed in Finland. And now we are seriously considering, and now the conversation is shifting, that a significant, I don't want to say majority, but there's a big force. There's a very, very influential opinion, this wave kind of descending on the Finnish political landscape, and we might actually pull out. We might actually pull out from the agreement. What do you think? Now, the US isn't a part of this agreement, but what do you think in terms of a country like Finland? Should Finland have anti-personnel landmines in 2024?
That's up to you. You know, I think that there are better ways. There's, I think it's called the M7 or M8 Spider system, which is essentially it looks like this 6 or 8 pronged grenade launcher. You know, it has like imagine a wheel with I think either 6 or 8 spokes, and each one of those spokes is a grenade launcher. You plant that thing down, and when the enemy comes by, the software alerts you that, hey, there's an enemy there, and then you can command detonate that grenade to explode. I think that might be a more effective way of delivering some sort of anti-personnel landmine-like experience for enemy soldiers. It's more expensive, but the advantage is that you don't have the cleanup. Now, that being said, I'm protected by 2 oceans. Finland is protected by a fence and a ditch, right? So it you know, this is something I learned when I was at NATO, that people in Europe have a much different view of Russia than we do in the United States, because they're right there, and the fear gets worse as you go east. You know, you Germans are kind of worried, French are worried, Germans are kind of worried, the Poles are worried, and then you go to the guys in Latvia, and they're ready to they're ready to go to war. So I actually think that one of the reasons the U.S. has bases in the Baltics is to prevent people in Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania from just saying screw it and going after Russia. Like they're sick of being pushed around by them for so many years. But it's a lot different. But that isn't necessarily something I think I should have a say in.
Sure.
Because that's something your country has to think about and weigh all of the options. Yes, it's an excellent defensive countermeasure against aggression. However, you're going to have to deal with the problems later. And there are more high-tech options like spider mines or like the spider launchers that can help defend areas like that. But here's the key. You have to invest in that.
Yeah.
You can't just say, all right, well, we'll kick the can down the road. I don't know if that translates well to Finnish.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Road. Yeah. I mean, that's up to you guys, because it will be cheap and it will be effective. Yeah. We've seen it in Ukraine and Russia. We used to think, oh, breaching a wire mine obstacle. Yeah. Get out the armored, get out the armored bulldozer, bulldoze that stuff right over. But it turns out it's a lot harder than we first thought.
Right. Something else relating to the Finnish military is we just spent like 8 billion euros, a bit over, buying 64 F-35s from your wonderful country. Seems like a really nice plane. I know you love the F-35. I've heard you talk about it a lot in your videos, but Elon Musk doesn't. He came out with a tweet saying that this is a obsolete death trap. There's no point in having these manned vehicles anymore flying in the air. They're going to be destroyed and they're going to kill people. Why not just have unmanned drones do the job of these flying human death traps? What do you think about this? Did we make a good investment?
You absolutely did. Think of the F-35 as a flying supercomputer. And I don't know, in the U.S., we have, in football, we have a term called a quarterback. All right. And I don't know what the equivalent is in soccer, but the quarterback kicks
Ice
the
hockey.
ball.
We're ice hockey in
Ice
Finland.
hockey. All right. So do you have someone in ice hockey who's in charge of the puck?
Kind of the
Who's
centerman,
that
maybe,
guy?
yeah.
The centerman. All right. So think of the F-35 as the centerman, right? And the centerman is going to look to his left and his right and look for what do you call the people in the left and right?
Left
What
wing,
are they?
right wing.
Forwards, left wing, right. So so imagine this. You get the puck, you look for your left wing, you look for your right wing. All right, who's open? I'm going to pass it to them. So the F-35 is basically your centerman. And it can coordinate with all of these other different platforms, both manned and unmanned, and tell it, okay, go after that thing over there, go after that thing over there. And I guess, do the centermen take shots as well? Do they hit the puck toward the goal?
Sometimes they're the best.
If it needs to,
yeah,
it can hit the puck toward the goal. It can actually fire some weapon systems as well. So think of the F-35 as the centerman, right? Like it's coordinating all this other stuff. It is probably the most advanced fighter aircraft on the planet. There is a use case for drones. There's absolutely a use case for drones. One of the issues is that, unless we put AI on these drones, and if we're going to do that, let's have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We can have that conversation, but if we put AI or if we use drones, we're going to have to control these drones with a human. And there's going to be lag involved. There's no human physically there. And there's also going to be communication involved. That drone has to either talk to a satellite or talk to another radio system or talk to another drone that relays that information back to a drone operator. So you have a little bit of lag there. And the enemy could cut off those transmissions. One of the reasons why we still have attack helicopters that do deep strike, we can take a squadron of 24, I think 12, 24 attack helicopters, and we can refuel those things through forward refueling points and have them do a deep strike at treetop level, 500 kilometers into the enemy's rear. And that's not something a drone can do because that drone is going to have to communicate back. And now it's going to be putting out a signal. It's going to be putting out everything on the electromagnetic spectrum and says, hey, I'm here. Whereas these helicopters, they're not really putting out a signal, and the operators of those helicopters can make decisions immediately. So one of the advantages that a manned jet gives you is you have an actual operator in the loop that can make decisions without transmitting back to someplace else. Because once you do that, you give away your location the second you transmit.
Right.
And if there's no satellites in the area, because satellites can get attrited, they can get shot down, they can get degraded. There's no satellites in the area, you still have that capability. So, and one final thing, look, I own a Tesla. I have the auto drive feature on my Tesla. It needs work.
It's not good enough.
Elon should have hired me to write his software. It needs work. And if you can't even get the software on your Tesla to navigate you correctly, good luck doing that in combat where you have to make constant decisions, not only about where to navigate, but whether to shoot or not shoot.
Interesting.
So that's kind of what Elon Musk needs to stay in his lane.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I did want to ask you about drones as well, also about AI-powered drones, but I'll come to that later. First, there's this new series in Finland. I wish you could watch it. I think it's geolocked. It's a new series in Finland, came out called Conflict in Finnish. It's about, I don't want to spoil too much, but foreign green men invade an island in southwestern Finland and take the locals they kidnap them, kind of hold them as ransom, and they want to rent the area. It's basically an invasion. It's a very interesting series. I love the first episode. There's this one scene when the president of Finland goes to this command center of the Finnish Defense Forces, and I don't know who, but some high officer guy is giving a situational report to the president, and he says that we were unable to send in drones to do reconnaissance in the area, so you're only getting satellite intelligence and signal intelligence right now.
Okay.
And I heard that, and I remembered thinking for a few seconds, like, what do you mean you can't send drones in there? I thought that was the point of having drones, is that you can send them anywhere. because they don't have people in them. So is this realistic? Are there actually like limitations for the use of drones?
There's probably some plot device there to not use drones. But one of the things that drones. So let's talk about navigation for a
Sure.
second. There's a couple of ways to do navigation. Um, the way that the drones from Aeromed Lab, the company that I work for, the way we navigate is we have a compass, literally, the same old compass they used as a Boy Scout. We have what's called inertial guidance, which is basically the accelerometer in your phone. In that you have a bunch of sensors, and as you move, the sensors physically move, and I think it's the difference of electrical charge in between the sensors that lets you know how fast you're going in a certain direction. And so if you put three of these sensors, once on the x-axis, once on the y-axis, and one on the z-axis, you can get a really good idea of your acceleration and in what plane in space you're moving in, or what vector in space you're moving in. And we also use terrain matching. So we take pictures of the terrain below and we compare that to a map. And then when we go back, when the drone returns from its mission, it downloads that information, so we update our maps. In case a building was blown up and there's rubble there now, we can use it as a landmark. So another way, there's a couple other ways you can do navigation. One is GPS. A lot of drones use GPS. And you could also do, so they used to have a system where essentially you have two radio beacons, and these two radio beacons send out a signal, and okay, tune to this radio beacon on this frequency and turn to this other radio beacon that's on a different frequency. And then once, there's a compass in there that points back to the beacon, you draw two straight lines back. That's where you figure out where you are. So there's a way to do it like that. But the problem is that any kind of beacon, whether it's GPS or whether it's radio, that can be jammed. So in that movie or that TV show, if the enemy had any kind of jammers, they were actively jamming GPS, then you probably wouldn't be able to send a drone in, especially if that drone relied on GPS to perform any kind of surveillance.
So does that mean the drones suck?
It's reasonable.
Does that mean that drones?
No, I mean they're great for certain purposes. Like it depends on the kind of drone that you're using. It's not. It's very difficult to put. Look, you own a car. I don't know if everyone in Finland owns. You don't own a car.
I mean, many do, but I live in the city. I don't need a car here.
Okay, so what's the most common car in Finland?
Oof, I don't know.
Like an SUV, like a Subaru or something like that?
Sedan.
No. Okay. So I'm sure there's plenty of sedans, right? Could you take that sedan and could you enter it into an F1 tournament? Right?
No.
No, I mean, you probably could, right? You'd get beaten, right? That doesn't mean the sedan sucks.
True.
But would you use your sedan? Would you use your F1 car to go to IKEA?
Probably not. No.
Right? Because, you get to IKEA, you can't put anything in the F1, right? So that doesn't mean the F1 sucks. It just means that it doesn't mean the F1 car sucks. It just means it was designed for a different purpose. So drones are designed for very specific purposes, and they're very good for those purposes. I got to tell you, if you have someone lost in the woods, like a hiker that's lost in the woods, or a hunter, and he didn't come back for 3 days, and you're like, well, where is this guy? Yeah, send out a drone. Use that thermal camera. Look for the hunter, right? That's a great capability for a drone. But to use a drone in certain situations where that drone is in an actively GPS denied environment, that's a lot harder. And that's just not a situation you'd put your drone in because it could be lost. So it doesn't necessarily mean it sucks. It's just a purpose. You're using that drone for a purpose it wasn't necessarily intended for, which is operating in a GPS degraded environment.
How difficult is it to GPS jam? Are those expensive? Are they common?
They're common for militaries. I know in the U.S. we have the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and you're actually not allowed to jam certain signals. Like civilians aren't allowed to own GPS jammers or cell phone.
Right. To be clear, by the way, I'm talking about military purposes. I'm not gonna get a GPS jammer.
Yeah, are they expensive? I've never done research on how much a Russian GPS jammer costs, but they're tied in with regular electronic warfare, EW. So probably just a couple $100,000 to a couple $1 million to jam GPS over a certain area. It probably depends on how much you're trying to jam. Like if you could have like there in Iraq, we had jammer systems that were supposed to jam the cell phone signals of roadside bombs, so that way people couldn't detonate the roadside bombs. They're called it was the backpack mounted Warlock system, and that had a bubble of about 40 meters. So the bigger you make anything, the more you have to transmit, the more power you need, the more expensive something's going to be. Actually, in Israel right now, they have a huge problem in northern Israel because Israel is jamming a good portion of northern Israel because it helps degrade Hezbollah rockets that use GPS guidance. And so, like the GPS is useless in Israel, like useless in northern Israel. And basically, you're just kind of getting on the same spectrum and sending out, or getting on the same spectrum, on the same channel, and sending out false data, sending out spoofing data. And jamming is really nothing more than, I'm sure you've been in a nightclub before, right?
Sure.
And you're trying to talk to your friend, right? But the nightclub is so loud, you got to put your ear really close to your friend. What? Are you want to go out for pizza later? Yeah. Right. That's jamming. Right. When you the background noise is so great that it drowns out your voice, right? Or your transmission and receiving transmissions. So, I mean, I guess I think your original question, is it expensive? I mean, not for a nation state.
Right.
Not for a nation state. It's just cost of doing business having an electronic warfare system.
Interesting. Okay, so the future of drone warfare is actually quite nuanced. It's not a silver bullet for every mission.
It can. I think as we move into the future, drone technology is going to change. We're seeing it. It used to be the cycle of tech in Ukraine was between 6 to 8 months. So every 6 to 8 months, there would be a new class of drones, or they would have advancements in drone technology. Now it's down to about 6 weeks. So every 6 weeks, there's some new advancement on either the Ukrainian side or the Russian side. The Russians just started using wire-guided drones.
What does that mean?
So that those can't be jammed. So you have these wire-guided loitering munitions and wire-guided first-person view munitions that are trailing a thin wire where all the commands and the video is sent down that wire. It's fiber optic wire. And that limits your range, but you can't jam it. So that's an innovation that Russia came up with, I guess, a couple of months ago, roughly. Now, they're a very limited utility, but they can't be jammed. So that kind of has a quality of its own.
Right. Interesting. Okay, I have a few more questions related to weapon systems. One was AI. This is a tweet that I saw just before I came here. I wasn't even going to mention this, but this somehow is like a perfect example to drop here in this podcast. Okay, I'm translating this on the fly from Finnish, so this might be clunky, but I'll try my best. Okay. Here's a perspective for future wars. An AI-powered or directed a million drone simultaneous attack. Heat-seeking cameras find the targets. A bomb drone drops a load on smaller targets, and kamikaze drones take care of the big ones. Something like that might be in the future. So that's why peace is more valuable than it was before. That's the whole tweet. I'm not interested in the philosophical pondering in the end. We can also talk about that if you want, but I'm interested in the AI-powered aspects of this. Like that terrifies me if I think about like being on the battlefield and seeing thinking, not even necessarily thinking, but acting, an autonomous machine looking at me as a target, but there being no human behind that decision-making at all. That's terrifying.
I can see why it would be terrifying. I think like in the moment, you're not really going to know, whether it's a human, and humans can be pretty terrifying all on their own. And I saw footage just yesterday of believe rebel forces just gunning down Syrian loyalist forces. This basically these Syrian loyalist forces surrendered, and these rebel forces just gunned them down, which is illegal. It's against the Geneva Conventions. But humans can be pretty darn terrifying on their own, and you could program an AI to say once someone surrenders, don't kill them, and the AI won't do it. Whereas if Daddy El Baddy is out there with his insurgents, hey, watch this, right?
Yeah.
I try. In some ways, I trust a computer a little bit more than I trust a human. Now, the realism of using millions of drones, it's certainly possible. It depends on the nature of the target. I've often said that what we're seeing in Ukraine, I would not rely on that for the future. I actually believe that Ukraine is going to see the rise and the fall of the drone all in the same conflict, because counter drone tech has gotten so good that I think we're going to see drones be a lot less effective as we come up with lasers, as we come up with other dogfighting drones. So this might be the only time we ever really see a conflict like this where we're using first-person drones to individually hunt down people. And honestly, the only reason Ukraine is doing that is that we dropped the freaking ball. It's that we slow-walked aid to Ukraine, aid that they needed. We gave them enough to lose slowly, but not enough to win. And that's on us. That's on the US. And some of that's on Europe too, because you guys kind of sat back and went like, oh, we're never going to have a war again. That Serbia thing, that was just a fluke. We're going to be fine. Let's just let our entire military degrade.
Yeah.
Until one day it wasn't fine. And if we're thinking of that the future wars look like Ukraine, the reason Ukraine looks like Ukraine is that we didn't give them the weapons they needed to do their job. And so they had to invent these first-person view drones to go after Russians one at a time. You need to kill Russians by the bushel. I don't know if bushel translates into Finnish, but imagine a barrel, all right? Imagine a barrel of apples. That's like a bushel.
Sure.
So there's a metric bushel. I don't freaking know. Measurements you guys use in your hundreds and thousands. But when you kill, you need to be killing by the dozen. All right. And first-person drones, the reason they're using them is that we did not give Ukraine enough artillery. And so they have to hunt down Russians individually. You could use that same drone and use it to spot for artillery and kill by the bushel. That's what you need to be doing. And we just didn't give Ukraine the tools to do that job. So the idea of having 1 million drones in a swarm, I mean, there's a lot of logistics to that. How do you get them all to the battlefield? Can you recover them afterwards? What's the cost? One thing that I keep saying, and I say this in interviews, how big is a swarm? Tell me how big a swarm is. Nobody can tell me how big a swarm is. Is a swarm 4 drones? Is it 8 drones? I mean, there were 8 members of the Wu-Tang Clan, the Killer Bee swarm. So maybe a swarm is 8. I don't know. Nobody can tell me what a swarm is.
Does it matter?
Talk about drone swarms. I think it does, because ultimately you need to raise the number of drones in that swarm to the cognitive level of the person controlling them. So, typically the United States Army believes that a team leader, one person, can control 3 people, right? That's why I have a fire team of 4 people, 1 leader, 3 other dudes. And a squad leader controls 2 people, 2 team leaders, at least in the Army, and then 3 team leaders in the Marines. So maybe the cognitive ability of us controlling things, our limit is 3. Now, maybe our limit is 3, and then those 3 drones that we control are electronically controlling more drones. Maybe that's a possibility. But it doesn't seem like anyone's done any research into what is the cognitive limit of what a person can handle. Because you might have these drone swarms and these AI powered drones making decisions about what to attack. That's great, but at some point there is going to be a human in the loop telling you what to attack, unless you're going to
Right.
outsource your entire war to AI, and that computer is going to say, okay, well, we need to attack China today, and by the way, I'm going to do it by myself because you guys don't have the guts to do it. And that's kind of the Terminator scenario, right? Where the AI says, oh, all right, well, you wanted me to do this, I'm doing it, right?
Right.
And the other issue is that depending on the size of the drone, some of these small drones, don't forget it might sound fanciful to have like this million drone army. How far can it go? Not very far, right? Now, if you're adding tech into that, like you have a large drone that's propeller driven, it's about the size of a small plane, and maybe it launches micro munitions or micro drones. Maybe that can get other drones to the fight. But some of these small drones, like they don't have their range isn't very far, and they don't carry a very large payload. So what do you do with that? Right? Like it might seem impressive to have a million drones, but if it can only go 40 kilometers, what do you got? You don't have a lot, right?
You're gonna have a light show?
You have a light show. They're great for a light show, but do not mistake a bunch of drones doing a light show for the capabilities of an F-35 that can drop a 2,000-pound bomb. I don't know how many kilos that is. Don't even ask.
I'm not gonna Google it right now.
1,200 kilos and
a lot. Yeah.
Whereas you could put a 2,000-pound bomb on a drone, but it's going to be the size of a large airplane, right? So that's something a lot of people don't think about. They don't think about the logistics. How do you charge all those drones? Imagine the footprint. That's another thing to think about. Let's say you have 1 million drones. Those drones didn't magically appear. You had to manufacture them, and then you had to charge them. And all that charging is going to create heat. And with all that heat, you're going to be able to spot where they're doing those drone charging on thermals, either through your own drones or through satellites. So it's really easy to say, oh, 1 million drones in the sky attacking targets through AI. That's great. How do you charge them? Tell me that. And, usually those people don't have the answer.
Interesting. You were recently in Brussels at a NATO meeting. This question kind of has to do with that. It's just for context. You were there. You're involved in these circles as well. You get invited to these places, which is very cool for you, probably. Very nice to meet people who work in this field. I'm curious. I think everyone in Europe is curious about what the U.S. thinks of us at this moment. Does the U.S. really care about Europe anymore? And what does it think about Europe anymore? And I'm thinking this from like a Finnish perspective. I need to ask you a question. If Russia invaded Finland or did a whatever SMO, special military operation in Finland next year, let's say, even a smaller one, obviously the American public opinion is split over Ukraine. Some people are very fond of the transatlantic union, the sort of bond, and see Russia as this historical enemy, see Europe as a partner, and whatever. Some people are more isolationist. Obviously, if there was a war in Taiwan, the consequences would be felt much more directly in like among the American people.
We don't even use Nokia phones anymore, dude.
No, right, exactly.
Oh no, we can't get parts from my Nokia that I haven't used in 20 years.
So that's what I was going to ask you. I don't know what you're reliant on Finland on. So like, what do you think? How do you think Americans would react if Russia invaded Finland?
Well, it would suck to lose Linux, but I think that's pretty distributed. I can tell you for the most part, Americans don't think about Europe at all. It's just not even, most Americans don't even have a passport. And that's something I once dealt with. I want to say there's some British soldiers, and they were in Texas, and they're like, "Oh, you think we can rent a car and go to Las Vegas for the weekend?" Like, gee, what? Do you have any idea how far Las Vegas is from Dallas? People don't really understand the scale of America, like how big it actually is. I'm traveling. I'm flying down to Texas in a couple of hours, and Dallas itself. There's a joke that Dallas, everything's an hour away. Dallas is an hour away from Dallas. I mean, you can. Dallas is so big that you can drive for an hour and still be in Dallas. And to the left of Dallas is Fort Worth. So people think, oh, Dallas Fort Worth. I'm going to the Dallas Fort Worth area because the airport is called DFW, Dallas Fort Worth. But if you live in Fort Worth, you better like Fort Worth because you're not going anyplace else. So, most Americans don't have a passport unless they live on the border or they got a passport to go on a cruise to the Bahamas. And when you think about it, like Europe, it's not just far away. It's not just a 6-hour flight, 7-hour flight from the East Coast, but try paying for a father, a wife, a husband, a wife, and 2 kids to go to Europe. We're talking $1,200 at the least, and you haven't even factored in the hotels yet, right? So Americans, we don't tend to go to Europe, and just like about 99% of anything you want to do is in America. If you want to go skiing, Colorado. If you want to go to the beach, Florida, California. We have it all here. There's no reason to leave. So Americans we just don't tend to think of Europe. There are some Americans who are like, oh, I want to go to France, like and study in France or something like that. Nobody says I want to go to Finland.
No.
Sorry, dude. Like,
it's true. I know.
That just doesn't happen, man. So I want to see where Linux was born. Like, all right. Well, that just doesn't happen. So I think that if Russia invaded next year, and I know you're kind of getting at President Trump, but if Russia invaded next year, the U.S. would meet its NATO obligations. Now, here's the interesting thing. People talk about NATO Article 5. Article 5 doesn't necessarily mean you have to fight. You're going to render the assistance you're able to render.
Yep.
So it's like getting invited to a birthday party. Some people get dressed up and go to the party, and some people just Venmo $50.
Yeah.
Right. And depending on what the U.S. wants to do, we might Venmo the $50, right? Because there's nothing set in stone that we have to send troops. We have to this. We have that.
That's right. Every country decides for themselves. Yeah, every country decides.
Every country decides for themselves, and that's one thing that we don't really talk about. Or when people, there's people I've met who think that NATO has an army. NATO doesn't have an army. There is no NATO army. NATO is a conglomerate of all these other armies that have agreed on certain standards for how they're going to do things. That's actually the most amazing thing about NATO. NATO is like this unstoppable snail. What's fascinating is that you get 32 countries to agree on things like bomb racks, right? You think of fighter planes, not so much. But we've all agreed that, okay, we're going to use this certain type of bomb rack. That way I can take a French missile and put it onto an American plane, or a British missile and put it onto a French plane. That's the real power of NATO, that we do all the hard stuff of coming up with standards. In fact, my watch band is a NATO standard.
Yeah.
There's a NATO standard for NATO watch bands, and there's an NSN number that you can type in and you can get a watch band from supply. So everything down to the watch bands we've already figured all that stuff out. We already have our classes of supply. Like, no matter where you go in NATO, class 1 means food, class 3 means petroleum, oil, and lubricants, class 5 means ammunition. Right? So if you see class 5, I know what that is. You see class 1, doesn't matter if it's a French ration, a British ration, American ration, okay, that's food. So that's kind of the magic of NATO. But as to whether America would help in the event that Finland was invaded, I would like to think we would, because it would certainly be a one-sided conflict, I believe. But look, Russia does not want conflict with NATO. They're terrified of conflict with NATO.
You think we'd kick them their ass that easy? I don't know if that would be that one-sided. I think it'd be pretty even. I'm joking. Obviously, I know what you mean.
So you should always respect your adversary. I can tell you that the Russian army that's currently in Ukraine is a lot different and a lot more experienced than the Russian army that bumbled into Ukraine in 2022. And they have real world experience in LSCO, or large scale combat operations. And they've been working with loitering munitions, AI, drones in real life for, it took about a year and a half to get their act together, but for a year and a half. And that's training just isn't necessarily a substitute for that. You can train all you want, but real world combat experience is certainly a factor. Now,
just
Air Force, not so much.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Yeah, because you said it would be one-sided. You would be one-sided, Finland would get crushed. Is that what you think?
I think NATO would rise to the occasion and they would destroy Russia, but it wouldn't, we would certainly get our hair mussed.
Yeah.
I think that we would be able to defeat the Russian Air Force fairly quickly. We would launch deep strikes into Russia, which would destroy air bases, fuel depots, logistics depots. Now, on the ground, dealing with Russian infantry, especially Russian infantry that had recently served in Ukraine, that are veterans of that campaign, as much as I would like to believe in the expertise of the average Finnish man who has his rifle and he hunts and he brings home his caribou for his family, going up against Russian infantry might be an issue, especially veterans. They would win. They would win, but there would be a cost to that. Like the romantic, look, every Finnish dude with a rifle who hunts, I'm sure they have this fantasy, they're them eating snow and like I'm slowly looking for the Russians, and it's nice to have that fantasy until the Russian Orlan 10 drone sees your thermal signature. It doesn't care that you ate snow to stop your breath from emitting, and then it drops an artillery round on you. Right? It's very romantic to have this notion until you actually get hit with artillery. I think that NATO would certainly clear the skies of Russian aircraft within days. We would do deep strikes into Russia to prevent them from actually being able to launch aircraft. But the average Finnish dude with a rifle that he hunts his caribou with, he might be able to attrit the Russians and slow them down, but it's not going to look like World War II. It's not. And I think in America, we have this image of every Finnish dude has a rifle and he goes out and hunts caribou on the weekends and brings it home because that's our image from World War II, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure things have changed. But I know Finland, some pretty significant gun ownership from what I understand, at least among rural areas. But yeah.
Yeah, and a pretty big army for a small country. But I mean, I think you're right. Like there is I don't know. I trust our military experts and I trust their assessments regarding these things, but I do agree that there are many, many, many romantic ideas of what this would be like, but I don't think romanticism has any place when you're planning a real war. So
it's super romantic to think about that. It's me and my rifle and you're smoking one last cigarette before, I'm the guy who's going to stay behind so my buddies escape. And fun to think about that until you get mortared and your arm doesn't work anymore and your leg is hanging off by a couple of tubes and you're bleeding to death and you can't move, and then the Russians show up and execute you.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't even render aid. So real romantic.
True. But it's not just a collection of farmers anymore, actually, in the Finnish army. Like it is definitely I just noticed that we've gone past 9. We've gone past our deadline. It's cool. I have a few more questions if that's fine with you.
Yeah.
Awesome. You said something really interesting in a podcast that I listened to a few weeks ago. You said that it's likely that the U.S. and China will have a hot war, and not even a proxy war. You think that U.S. troops will battle Chinese troops within the coming years. Why do you think that?
In October of 2027 or April of 2028. Yeah.
You have the dates.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, those so China has ordered its military to be able to invade Taiwan by 2027. There's only two weather windows that you can. Boy, I hope that translates well into
Sure.
the Finnish. There are 2 months that it is safe to cross the Strait of Taiwan, and that's October and April. So after those times, the sea states are high, and it won't necessarily work for troops. So we need to be ready by 2027 because that's when China has said that they were going to be ready. And it won't necessarily be troops. It could be troops, but it most likely will be a Navy and Air Force show with some Marines helping out. But yeah, those are the most likely dates. 2027,
What do you think?
October 2027.
That
What's
seems that seems massive. I can't imagine what that is. That seems like World War. That seems insane. That seems those are the two biggest superpowers in the world right now going to war with each other. What would that look like?
It would look pretty bad. So I've said before that we're gonna know China's gonna do it when they start having national blood drives. In China, I think like 8% of the people there give blood. Like people just don't give blood in China. It's just culturally not something they do. So once we start seeing the Chinese start telling people it's their patriotic duty to give blood, or they try to break the Guinness Book of World Records for blood donated on one day, that's when we know they're getting ready to do it. It would look pretty bad. There would be quite a few missiles flying around in the South China Sea. Some of those missiles are going to hit U.S. ships, and ships are going to go down with all hands, meaning everyone on that ship is going to die. That's just not something we're used to. We're used to people like maybe in Iraq, Afghanistan, 20 people was a horrible day.
Mm.
And we're going to lose 300 dudes on a destroyer in one day. It's not going to be good. We lose an aircraft carrier, 5,000 people. And last war game we did, which was a civilian run war game with no secret intelligence, we lost 2 aircraft carriers in that battle. We won, but we lost 2 aircraft carriers. So another thing we're going to see in a war like that is we're going to see intensive cooperation between the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, France, the UK, Canada, and quite possibly South Korea. So we have this doctrine that we call any sensor, any decider, any shooter. And the idea is that we've developed these network pipelines, these massive data network pipelines, so that you have an Australian Special Forces soldier and he's sitting on a reef, like on an island in the South China Sea. And with his binoculars, which is a sensor, he sees a Chinese ship. All right, I see the Chinese ship, and he sends a radio message to an American AWACS plane, an American command and control plane. And that American command and control plane identifies this Australian Special Forces guy, and it tells a Filipino HIMARS launcher, hey, there's a target over here. Launch rockets at this target. So we're going to see this incredible amount of communication and cooperation between various nations. So literally any sensor, a dude with binoculars can spot a target, call a decider, and the decider can talk to any shooter, choose the best shooter that can survive that engagement. Because, once you fire that missile, now everybody knows where you are, so you got to leave, right? So that best shooter might be a Navy ship, might be a submarine, it might be Air Force aircraft, might be a lot of things. Might be a HIMARS launcher. It's in the Philippines. And they can shoot. Because we're never going to defeat China missile for missile. China has more missiles. They're going to win. China has more ships. So we need to be smart about killing China's arrows while they're still in the quiver. I don't know how that translates into
Sure,
Finnish.
I'm
the
following
thing
you.
Put your arrows in.
Right. The arrow holder.
Arrow holder, yeah. So we need to blow up the arrows while they're still in the arrow holder.
Yeah.
That's our job.
Interesting. But what about drawing? Would that be the first time ever when 2 nuclear superpowers go to war with each other head on head?
No, because sort of. I don't know, because in I believe in the Korean War, there were Russian pilots that were flying among North Korean pilots, and then certainly during Vietnam, there were Russians in the SA-2 trailers, in the anti-aircraft missile trailers. They were going after, they were trainers, but they're helping them out, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and look, the U.S. is providing ISR data, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance data to Ukraine. So what's the difference between doing that and killing Russians ourselves? We're telling
Right,
them
they're
where they
pretty
are.
deep down the kill chain already. Yeah, with the
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But my question is related to China and the U.S. is how do you? Now, I don't study this, so this might be a super question. But how do you draw red lines? Would you expect in a scenario like that? Would you expect strikes into mainland China, into the U.S.?
We're Americans. We got like 13 red lines on our flag, man. 7 red lines on our flag. We don't. We don't. Red lines. What the hell's a red line? Right? Step over those things all the time. We we're going to do what needs to be done to attrit the enemy's ability to wage war. I could see the United States saying, no, we're not going to attack targets in mainland China, and there's going to be grumbling about it. But then there might be some targets they do attack, like military radars, or sites like shipbuilding facilities, or we could do something like that. I don't see us bombing cities. Like,
No.
that stuff ended with World War II. You don't bomb cities anymore. But I could certainly see us attacking targets in the Chinese mainland. Now, that could open up the Chinese physically attacking targets in the US, which is kind of scary because Americans have literally never had to deal with that. I think the last time we had a foreign invasion was War of 1812, when the Canadians went and burnt the White House. You know, so I think once, like, the Japanese dropped a couple of bombs, like, well, it was Pearl Harbor, but I think they put a couple of bombs in a weather balloon and hit like Alaska or something. um, but that could certainly happen with the U.S. under ballistic missile attack, or submarine launched ballistic missile attack, which would be kind of scary because once those submarines launch those missiles, you don't know whether they're conventional or nuclear.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an issue. But at a point like that, we might have THAAD batteries on the West Coast, and those THAAD batteries would take out the terminal high altitude defense batteries, which would destroy these incoming enemy ballistic missiles.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's certainly possible that mainland targets could be attacked.
Wow. How likely do you think this war is?
I think there's a roughly even chance.
50-50?
50-50. I think it's 50-50. The Chinese, there's a saying in China that it's easier to buy Taiwan than invade Taiwan. And I think that's kind of the route China wants to go. They want to kind of turn Taiwan into Hong Kong, where they slowly just influence politicians until China kind of has taken over Hong Kong without firing a shot. I think that's their ideal situation. But President Xi, if he wants something done, the army's going to do it. And the fear of retaliation from the West didn't seem to stop President Putin. And I could easily see China believing, because China already has a super weapon. It's called TikTok. And I guarantee you, the day after China invades Taiwan, TikTok is going to start talking about how Taiwan has always been Chinese. America's efforts to free Taiwan are an imperialist, colonialist, militant, warmongering stance. China is just trying to reunite with the Taiwanese people who have been influenced by the Americans. Ba 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 ba. And I could easily see people in the United States questioning their own values as to whether or not Taiwan should be supported. Because who cares? Who cares? It's Taiwan. They feel that way until they can't buy their laptop that year, right, or their iPhone.
Yeah.
But I think it's a 50-50 chance. Depends on whether China thinks they're at an advantage, and if we give up on Ukraine, China will be far more emboldened to take it by force. Because if we can't support a country that has a freaking rail line connected with Poland, we're not going to support a country that is 6,300 miles, about 10,000 kilometers away from the U.S. We're not. So we need to show that we support Ukraine, because that is the best way of deterring a war with China.
Right. Yeah, nothing's really close to Taiwan except maybe the Philippines. But even there's
China.
And China, yeah.
And China. China only has 100 miles. Sorry. 160 kilometers. China only has like 100 miles across. And we have to cross 6,300 miles of ocean. Not so easy. It's called the tyranny of distance.
Ryan McBeth, this has been amazing. As I said before we started this interview, this is looking at you through the screen right now. This may be the most amount of vitamin D that I've gotten in months being here in Finland. This is the dark time of year. This was an absolute pleasure. Your cigar's almost done as well, so this may be a perfect time to end this. This was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, man. Go clean your rifle.
I will. Thanks. And have a good day.
Thank you.
And listeners and viewers, hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for sticking with us for this long. Go look at English interviews that we've done before. And also, if you have anyone that you'd like us to interview, anyone English speaking or someone international, please comment down below and we'll take a look. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.